Joe, when I was beefing with him, he would go, "We everywhere, you never there." And it's because I was already in the arenas. So what would I be doing back in the nightclub?
Yeah.
At that point.
I like to tell the people home, I feel so safe tonight with all this police protection courtesy of G Unit. Fat Joe is man. Pussy boy.
After Terrence T.A. Dixon filed a complaint alleging that he witnessed the rapper groom, isolate, and sexually exploit minors while employed by his company, a lawyer for Fat Joe, whose real name is Joseph Antonio Cartagena, fired back.
50 Cent just broke his silence on how Fat Joe tried to have him killed. And now Joe's being dragged into a RICO lawsuit that backs that up. And this isn't just about rap beef anymore. We're talking about a murder plot, disturbing claims about Joe being a PDF file, and allegations that he ran his crew like a criminal organization. And the wildest part is that the guy spilling everything is Joe's hype man, who was by Joe's side for over a decade. So how does 50 Cent fit into all this? Well, as you all know, 50 and Joe's beef back in the day was serious. And according to this lawsuit, Joe tried to off 50 multiple times. And the only reason it didn't go through was because 50's security was too locked in. Now here's where it gets even messier, because 50 finally responded to the claims. However, his version of events is slightly different than what the lawsuit says. Basically, 50's saying it was never that serious. But what the fans are trying to figure out is, why would he downplay an attempt on his life unless there's more to the story? So let's get into what this RICO lawsuit against Fat Joe says, how 50 reacted, and how this ties to the old G-Unit versus Terror Squad war, and why people think this might be way bigger than just Fat Joe getting sued. Because once you see the names, the timeline, and the accusations, it gets real wild. In fact, people are saying these allegations are even worse than what Diddy's being accused of. Let's break it down.
What happened, Daddy?
It's not Joe's record. How is he doing? It hurt me. I can't do it. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the money.
So according to this brand new lawsuit from Fat Joe's former hype man, Terrence T.A. Dixon, Joe didn't just want 50 silenced, he wanted him dead. Dixon claims Joe put out a hit during the peak of his beef with 50 and that it was meant to look like a robbery. The lawsuit says Fat Joe engaged in a calculated and premeditated conspiracy to murder rapper Curtis Jackson, known professionally as 50 Cent. Around the winter of 2006 to 2007, defendant Cartagena was residing in Miami when he received a call reporting 50 Cent's presence at a New York venue. Defendant Cartagena ordered a hit, but 50 Cent was surrounded by Navy SEAL-type security, and the would-be assassins were afraid to make the attempt. The lawsuit claims Fat Joe straight up told people to put a bag on 50 Cent's head and was frustrated he couldn't make it happen quickly enough. Dixon also claims in his lawsuit that Joe told his associates that he was trying to get 50 for a minute. The lawsuit states the defendant was visibly distraught and shaking when discussing the plot's failure, suggesting not only intent and active planning, but also direct coordination with individuals acting on his behalf. Dixon claims that the plot involved tracking 50 Cent's movements via his performance schedule and attempting to ambush him at multiple public venues. So once this lawsuit made headlines and 50 finally responded, a lot of people were expecting a full-blown meltdown. But instead, 50 posted a message seemingly defending Joe and calling the lawsuit from Dixon a stick-up. 50 shared a photo of himself and Joe to the soundtrack of Young Buck's Prices on My Head. And he wrote in the caption, "These baseless accusations and claims are not credible. I'm sorry Joe has to endure the public scrutiny and damage to his reputation. This is stick-up. I wrote this hook. I should have kept this one." But it looks like a lot of people are confused by 50's reaction, and they're saying they can't tell if 50 is being petty or sincere. And someone else said, "Fifth is playing chess. If he goes this route, Joe will be loyal AF because he knows it's true. Sincere my A." Now, obviously anyone can say anything in a lawsuit, but this is someone who had access. Someone who claims Joe ran his whole operation like a mob boss and that the hit on 50 wasn't the only dirty move made behind the scenes. So let's break down what else TA is accusing Joe of, because the murder claim isn't even the worst part, believe it or not. Here's where it gets real disturbing. According to Dixon, Fat Joe engaged in relations with A minors and even paid for a BBL to a girl who was 15. The complaint, filed in federal court in New York, makes so many graphic claims about Fat Joe's involvement with young women that it actually starts with a trigger warning. And the document is 157 pages long, So Dixon states in the lawsuit that Fat Joe forced him into humiliating situations, including SCX acts performed under duress and surveillance, accompanied by threats of abandonment in foreign countries if he refused compliance. According to Dixon, he was coerced into more than 4,000 acts to maintain his standing within the enterprise. But definitely the most disturbing part of the lawsuit is the one where Dixon describes how Fat Joe allegedly engaged in relations with female victims who were not legal adults at the time. Dixon also claims he personally witnessed Fat Joe engage in relations with victims who were 15 and 16. And then he lists 3 Jane Doe victims, including a 16-year-old Dominican from New York who, in exchange for cash, clothing, and payment of her cell phone bill, would perform certain acts on Fat Joe. The second alleged victim is described as a Caucasian female and not a United States citizen. According to Dixon, Fat Joe started having relations with Jane Doe when she was 15, and he says it happened after a concert overseas. And allegedly, Fat Joe flew this girl to New York City and Miami, Florida on multiple occasions. But this next part is actually sickening. Dixon claims that due to Jane Doe's body being not fully formed, Fat Joe paid for her to get a BBL. As for Jane Doe 3, Dixon states that she's a Latina female who met Fat Joe when she was 15 years old, turning 16. According to Dixon, Fat Joe was in love with Jane Doe 3, and he even contemplated leaving his wife. The complaint alleges that Fat Joe paid all Jane Doe 3's bills and even took her overseas to his tour stops. And he also allegedly brought her to Florida and would put her up in a condo he rented a few blocks from his house with his wife. According to Dixon, Fat Joe was in his late 30s at the time. Dixon also included multiple photos of Jane Doe 3 with her friends from high school, and he claims these photos were taken at the same time Fat Joe was moving Jane Doe across state lines. So does this mean Fat Joe is being hit with a RICO lawsuit? Well, here's the thing. At the moment, this is a civil RICO lawsuit. Civil RICO is a way for private individuals to sue someone under the RICO Act, which is a law originally created to go after the mafia and organized crime. And to win a civil RICO case, the plaintiff has to show there was an enterprise, like a group or organization, not just a random individual. And this is what T.A. Dixon is claiming. He's alleging that Fat Joe ran a criminal enterprise alongside his co-conspirators. Dixon even named 2 of these alleged co-conspirators, Pete Pistol Pete Torres and Richard Rich Blair Jospeter, and he described them as key associates in Fat Joe's criminal enterprise. Another thing that Dixon needs to prove to win this case is that this enterprise was involved in a pattern of racketeering activity, meaning at least 2 criminal acts like fraud, extortion, illegal substance trafficking, or witness intimidation. Plus, he has to show that those acts happened over time and were not just a one-time thing. Basically, RICO makes everything sound bigger because it suggests an organized system of crime, not just isolated wrongdoing. And that's why it's used strategically in lawsuits. Even if the case is civil, the word RICO carries weight and makes people and the feds pay attention. Because if there's one thing the feds love, it's a longtime associate turning into a witness, especially one claiming he saw it all firsthand. And let's be real, it's not like RICO charges are new in hip-hop right now. From YSL to Casanova, and of course Diddy, the feds are clearly watching. But if the allegations are real, and this kind of structure was in place for over a decade, the big question now is, why did T.A. Dixon stay silent so long? Is 50 Cent right to call this a stick-up? And what made Dixon finally flip? That's where we're going next. Well, according to Dixon, he stayed quiet out of fear, not just for his career, but for his life. He claims there were threats made when he tried to step away, and that Joe kept him close because he knew too much. Now, most people outside the industry don't know the name Terrence A. Dixon, but he was Fat Joe's hype man for 16 years, standing next to him on tour after tour. But now Dixon's flipping the script and claiming Joe used his power to keep everyone around him under his control through fear and intimidation. So now a lot of people are asking, is this about justice or is it revenge? Because if you dig into what really caused the fallout between T.A. Dixon and Fat Joe, it wasn't one moment. Dixon claimed it was years of being used, underpaid, and allegedly pushed out once he stopped playing along. And get this, he even named Roc Nation in his lawsuit, alleging that they helped Fat Joe run his criminal empire. In fact, Dixon described Roc Nation as a strategic facilitator and aider of racketeering activity. According to Dixon, Roc Nation was aware or willfully blind to Fat Joe's criminal conduct. And Dixon claimed he was one of the victims of this conduct that included forced labor, financial fraud, retaliatory violence, and X trafficking. But see, it's the timing that's raising eyebrows. People are asking now, when Joe's career has been relatively quiet and all the real heat's being aimed at other rap moguls, is T.A. Dixon trying to sneak his case in and get a payout because federal eyes are currently on the hip-hop scene? Or is he telling the truth and this is just the first domino? So now we've got a 157-page RICO lawsuit packed with disturbing allegations, including PDF file activity. But in the middle of all that, 50 Cent's brushing it off and basically saying Fat Joe's being set up. Now, we know how hard 50 Cent went against Diddy and even dragged Jay-Z into it, so why is he so sure Fat Joe's innocent? I mean, Diddy hasn't even been found guilty yet, and 50's already filming a documentary about his alleged crimes. And as for Jay-Z, 50's been calling him out ever since the first lawsuit against Diddy dropped. In fact, just weeks ago, 50 trolled Jay again and insinuated that he was involved in Diddy's blowing up of Kid Cudi's car. But now that Fat Joe's being sued and his accuser even named Jay-Z's Roc Nation as co-conspirators, 50 Cent's still dismissing it. However, maybe that fan who said that 50 plays chess was correct. Maybe 50 isn't actually defending Joe, but he's just looking out for his own best interest. And the real question is, how much does 50 Cent know? Because if Fat Joe really tried to put a bag on 50's head, and if the rest of this lawsuit holds up, then this is just the beginning. The RICO wars are here, and some insiders are now saying the feds could come for 50 next.